Grace Francisco, your host for the Women in Tech series here at Atlassian. I head up developer advocacy for my day job. Today, I'm really thrilled to be having a great speaker today. Her name is Jin Zhang.
Good job.
She has had a great career. She's been an engineering exec at IBM. She went on to Apigee to be their VP of engineering and help lead them to their successful IPO. And she's currently a product leader for CA today, and she's also a champion for women in tech. She and I actually met earlier this year at Developer Week. We had 2 back-to-back panels around women in tech conversations, and so that's where we ended up meeting. And as the world is so very small, we ended up having several friends in common that are also women in tech advocates. So please help me in welcoming Jin. Thank you for coming.
Thank you. Thank you, guys. It's indeed an honor to have this opportunity. I have to say, when I first met Grace at the developer conference, she has a panel right after mine. And immediately, just as I stayed in the same room to catch up with a couple of other panelists who happened to be my friend for her panel, I can immediately tell the quality of that panel, how much thought Grace has put into being the bone and the soul of it, and also how much passion she really has for the topic, which is why from there I took a note. It was like, I need to go get to know her. She's going to be my friend. And indeed, I think we've since then had a lot of fun together, which is why when we were brainstorming one day over lunch, and she said, at Atlassian, we have this Women in Technology series, and we have folks get together. I immediately asked all kinds of questions. How, what did you guys do? Because it's indeed something speaks very close and dear to my heart, and for that reason, I'm really happy to be here. I also want to say it's been my dream, and it's kind of a dream coming true today, to be at Atlassian. Why? Because I've been a big fan of your work in a couple ways. Let me share a couple of things just so that we could relate better. One, of course, I am a fairly loyal user of your products. Today, I still use Confluence. I think previously with my startup, we used Jira, we use HipChat, we use Confluence. So I think I got your suite very well covered. And big thank you for all of your hard work. That was so much of our backbone that I cannot imagine for one day of my life there, we don't speak the lingo of Jira. So thank you, guys. And then with that, the second reason I have been fairly curious and very excited about Atlassian is because of your support, your Knowledge Center support. Why? 2 lives ago, I was at IBM responsible for the Rational Worldwide Support business. And my particular focus, rather than running the day-to-day business, was more to look for strategic transformation. So that was somewhere, I think, in 2011, 2012, especially 2012, I studied you guys really, really hard. You guys were with me through your YouTube videos and a lot of your collaterals out there, because I was really key in trying to discover not only some of the best practice and some of the success you guys have had, but also, believe it or not, at the time for IBM, being a 100-year company, it actually takes more than what a accountable executive can do to be able to leverage examples and quotes to say, here is a new company, and this is their success, and this is how they've done their support dramatically different from how we've done it in the last 30 years, right? I am happy to report that I think since then, we were able to adopt not only KCS, we brought in live chat, which if you think about it, for a large company like that, trying to roll things out in a global scale is fairly difficult. There was just, the big elephant moves a lot slower. But I was grateful that I was able to leverage a lot of the success and a lot of the examples you guys have shared. So for all these reasons, again, I'm just very happy to be here and finally get a chance to be up and close with the Atlassians here. So with that, let's move on to our topic today. Grace was asking me, what would you like to talk about? And I was asking her, what would you like me to talk about, right? it was also around the time where I live in the peninsula area, so I work in Santa Clara. So right around there were about 5 or 6 companies. We worked together in an effort called Networking with a Purpose. And so among the group there was EMC, there was Cisco, there's Oracle, VMware, just a bunch of us all right there, Intel too. And the idea is we would take turns hosting these events and get women, and men welcome too, to come together to network. But we wanted to network with a purpose. So besides food and drink, we also wanted to have some meaningful discussions. And that was a format where we would each time have about 12 round tables together. We would have volunteers each raise a topic and facilitate a table of discussion, right? So if you're interested in a particular topic, come in and sign up. If you are interested in another one, hopefully we'll have enough topic to have things spread out. So this was during the time when Grace and I were talking about this visit. I was preparing for that event too. And by the way, that's coming up next Thursday. So I had a couple of topics handy. And one of them, I'd like to try that out here today. So you guys will have to give me feedback. I have been thinking about this topic for quite a while. And I felt very passionate that here, I'd like to share with you guys a very important part of our outreach as we grow our career. That is, we really have to be very mindful in enlisting help and support from men in our network. I hope to cover this topic in 2 sections. One, I'd like to talk about why. I hope to be able to convince you there's clearly value and a lot of feasibility, meaning men would welcome us to do that, and I did validate my point of view. And then hopefully from there, we'll talk a little bit about how. I want to make this clear that I'd love to be this let this be an interactive session. So, if you have a thought, if you have a comment, please don't wait for the Q&A at the very end. I don't like monologues, so let's just spread them out and have a brainstorming as we go. So let's first talk about why. Why do we need to enlist and very mindfully enlist support and help from men in our network? First and foremost, I believe in strongly that women in technology is not about a women's support group. This is a professional setting where we all look to learn and to give, to contribute. And for that reason, we really have to look at the total landscape of the environment we're in, rather than trying to find a corner, huddle together, and cry over each other's shoulder. Right? So let's face it, take a guess of the statistics today, right? My first visit here at Atlassian in your San Francisco office, give me a percentage of women in your workplace here. Just shout out some numbers to help me. 20%? Okay. Take a guess of just technology industry in San Francisco, in the city here, percentage of women. 17, well, you must have read that report. So the 17%, I believe, was a fairly recent and fairly large study to talk about percentage of women in the technology sector, right? The space I've spent my entire career, and probably many of you as well. So the point is black and white, guys. We deal with data every day. We're looking at 17% of us, but we live in this total of 100% mass here. So why do you want to ignore that huge chunk that could be so big part of both your success and failure and only focus on the 17? And I have always shared this with colleagues around me to say, you know what, we cannot just close the door and say this is only about women, because it's not. It is really not the end goal either. I think our end goal is for all of us, men included, to have a very productive, fun workplace that helps all of us to achieve both our professional goals as well as the business goals. So it is not about having a group set aside. Now with that, I'd like to give you an example, a story that I have experienced in person, which really helped me to see this point a lot more clear. So I spent 11 years in IBM, and I have been pretty lucky there that I've had all kinds of opportunities. I get to pick the projects. I get to pick the teams I want to work in. Every couple of years within the company, I felt like I was in a new business. I was learning something new. And both from technology, from the type of the responsibilities, or more switching from technology to turn around and learn business, right? I even did merge and acquisition for 2 years, right? Being the integration exec, going in for the, embedded with the incoming company to bring them in. So tons of learning. And for that reason, along the way, I have volunteered for an internal group, probably just like you guys in IBM, called Super Women's Group. And that's a fun group. I mean, I spent a lot of time volunteer for that group, later on leading that group, for leading the core team for 7 years. So let me tell you a little bit about the group, right? This is a group virtually covers entire IBM women. So, we have total 400,000 employees. Take 17%, you get the rough idea. Quite a bit, right? And besides, so every month we would have a virtual call, like what we're here doing, right? So we would have speakers come in, we would have a topic, and we would have the replay available worldwide. We would also supplement these virtual calls with local chapter activities. So San Francisco would have face-to-face meeting, lunch gathering, book clubs, and then we would do specifically advancement initiatives, meaning we would pair a high potential woman with a very high-ranking executive mentor to say, we'd like to get you two to talk. And they will. And we would do this, by industry, by band, do a lot of geo matching and all that stuff. We also have gone out to all of our C-level female executives in the customer. So for example, we interviewed the president of Prudential Insurance in Korea. She's a lady, she's a Korean lady, and have her talk about her own choice of family versus career and some of the struggles she had to go through, right? Or we would talk to somebody who's heading up a business in Spain, and obviously you can already tell just from the tone and the vibes there, it's completely different personality, dynamics, and everything. But that's how we learn, and we bring all that information back to sharing. So again, with all of these, I hope you get a sense about how busy we've been with this Super Women group. If you think about that's quite a bit, and that's very impactful for women, that's how I thought so too. However, later on I've learned that was not my most proud accomplishment. My most proud accomplishment was actually about influencing one individual person. And that person is Tom Rosemiller, who is currently a group executive, a group GM in IBM. So at the time, he's responsible for the WebSphere team, and you guys probably heard about that brand there, right? And in this one of these, as I mentioned, this matching mentor-mentee session, we connected him with a high potential women. And then from there, he also became specifically our sponsor for the advancement initiative. So throughout, we probably had 3-5 specific conversations with Tom about what we're trying to do, about the statistics we'd like to share, about the progress we've made. One thing that has made difference, Tom, from these conversations, really started to pay attention about workplace diversity. And in IBM, for senior leadership come to executive level, there's something called a 5-minute drill. So whenever there's an opening, there's an opportunity, or talking about starting a new business unit and we need an executive leader there, the team, the E team would come around the table and do the 5-minute drill. Do you have a candidate? Let's talk about him or her for 5 minutes. Do you have a candidate? Let's bring up that qualification for 5 minutes, right? Tom, in one of these conversations, and I would like to say due to the influence of what Super Women's Group has been telling him, asked the question, how come out of all these 5-minute drills so far, I haven't heard a single candidate who's a woman? And that was really the starting point for people to say, oh, okay, he cares about it. He's aware. Let me work harder, right? So he said, team, you guys go back. We're going to do this again next week, but I'd like to see the mix a little bit more balanced. This right now doesn't make sense. We have a team of 7,000 people here. I don't believe you don't have a single woman that's qualified to be even in the 5-minute drill. He has been doing that ever since that conversation. So if you think about it, we may have jazzed up a few women here and there through these activities. We may feel a lot of us internally more connected. We may make friends. But if you truly look at some of those advancement measurement, I'd say influencing Tom alone was my most significant success measurement, right? Because he's there. He had the power. He had the ability and the influence to be very critical with his team. And he could rightfully say, I'd like to see a women candidate. So that story really was sort of the beginning for me to think about this point, right? And that was, you know what? We've been spending so much time trying to get women to come together, trying to get them to talk, to share, to support each other. These are all good. But let's keep in mind, that is only probably the 17 or the 20%. We need to do more than that. We need to open the door, and we need to get a lot more folks involved, and specifically looking at the overall total of our workplace. Which is why I'm also very happy to see, a couple of men here joining us. I want to share that when I was talking to you guys about the Super Women's Group calls, on those virtual calls, I've always had men joining. I've had multiple of them approaching me to say, Jin, I like the topic. I think the speaker is really good. And quite frankly, everything you guys talked about, we can relate. Even the parenting part, we could relate too, right? So why not? Of course. And that leads to my second part. Not only you see the need of why involving men and enlisting their support is very critical, at the same time, I also believe through my validation that men are open to it. They're willing to. Let me give you a couple of other examples here, right? After IBM, I decided to try a startup. So I went to Apigee. And Apigee was a pretty small team. At the time, I was number 300. And in our San Jose, Palo Alto, then San Jose office, we probably had about 100 people. So it's not a very big team. But obviously, I was not going to let size or readiness or anything stop me from my passion of getting, the workplace diversity jazzed up and getting people all feel great about where we work. So about 2 sprints ago in May, we hosted Girls Geek Dinner. And I sponsored that event as their VP of engineering. I said, let's bring in people to get to know about Apigee, know about the product. We needed marketing, we needed recruiting, and ourselves need to get to know each other better. So what else could be a better venue to spend that kind of investment? So we did that. As we had a beautiful event and wonderful turnout and huge success in all these aspects, as I mentioned here, one side benefit that I did not anticipate is that I actually had quite a few male colleagues coming to me afterwards to say, that was so cool. You guys put on such a nice event together for people coming to visit Apigee. We should do that for our own Apigeeks. And I said, okay, we will do that. So then I also hosted a set of, we call them kitchen talks, because we have a kitchen similar like you guys, and it was really easy just to say, grab a snack, grab a drink, and we'll sit down and talk, right? And there was completely no agenda, no preparation, just randomly whatever, right? But folks would come to me to say, Jin, I felt like we should talk about company politics. Or we should talk about how to get help when you really felt like it's, the work is too demanding and you also have young children. So we just kind of, threw out a topic and people all started jumping in and help. And guess what? I've always had almost half and half participant there, men and women, right? Men are absolutely eager to help and willingly see the value because, as I said earlier, this is how they also see the overall workplace needs to be fun, needs to be well collaborated, and understanding each other better simply helps with that. In fact, one of my close friend in Apigee, so Greg Braille is our chief architect. He was very interesting. He's quite a character, right? He would go there and join these conversations and then come back and he'll say, what, I learned a couple of things about those developers. I'm going to approach them, this other way as we get to the next design discussion. Wow, I was surprised to see that, right? Because he is taking advantage of those opportunities to say, I now have a new understanding of this team member, and I'm going to leverage that knowledge as I collaborate with this team member. And that's exactly what we're looking for. So, any thoughts, any question about maybe that is a ridiculous idea about enlisting men's help in our career growth before I get into the how part? I'm going to pause.
Was there anything in particular that you did to get the men to come to those events?
That's such a great question, Grace. For the very first one, for Girls Geek Dinner, I didn't. In fact, we limited attendance from any Apigeeks, men or women, because we want to save the seats for external attendees, right? However, most of the leadership team, again, you can take a 17% ratio there, maybe even significantly less than. Maybe I would say there's only 5% of women on the Apigee leadership team. But because the leadership team were there trying to support the event, they really see the value. So later on, with the fireside chat, I don't think we had to sell much at all. They just came in, and in fact, their level of participation, their contribution surprised me in a delightful way. Which is why I am more than confident to say, geez, it's not that hard. We should tackle this, because they're interested in helping us, and we should do that. So with that, let's move in a little bit to the how. I wanted to get into, then how do we do that? For the how part, I'd like to cover this by 3 parts. Understanding yourself, or understanding ourselves, who we are and what are some of our unspoken, understanding or assumptions. Take ownership. If we say, okay, then makes sense, let's go do it. And the third part would be small things matters. And I wanted to bring up a couple of thoughts and observations I've had just to exchange some ideas, and hopefully you'll get very, meaningful things that you could start observing your own behavior and start apply some of these findings together. So first, understanding yourself. I wanted to ask a couple of questions. Let's specifically ask the ladies here in this room, right? Before you come to join a new team, and before you come to, let's say, your very first team meeting, do you make assumptions before you do anything, say anything, do any task? Do you make any assumptions? I see a shake of hand there. That's awesome. Others? What are some of the assumptions you try not to make?
Well, you try not to assume how people are going to react to you, what people are going to think about you, but I think it's pretty natural to go in any situation, with assumptions based off past experiences.
Right on, right on. I spoke to a lot of women, people I interact with, people I mentor. A lot of assumptions were made before coming in to start anything at all. That is, what is my role in this project? Do some of you sometimes assume that? Start to think, oh, this is my role versus that is not my role. What's the roles for other team members in this particular project, whoever that you're interacting with, right? Let's say we're about to walk into a meeting, Grace and our meeting, are you kind of going through mentally, Grace, what's her role, and me, what's my role, right? And then also, what's the expected outcome? Who is accountable for the outcome? So if you think about, try to examine what are some of the just minds way back at your head they're going through, walking into anything. I've also consulted some of my friends who are men, and in fact, you guys should validate that for me. They were like, no, Jin, we never think about any of those, so we just go right in. Is that true for you?
I don't know. I think there are some things you'll sort of question or try to prepare yourself for, but I guess I do make some assumptions, but probably not many.
Probably not many. Yep. And like I said, again, as I mentioned, so far a lot of the discussion we've had, I find it not uniquely applying to women, but sometimes there is a tendency, one gender tend to do more than the other. But this one I find pretty common is sometimes we're making a lot of assumptions, but they may not be necessary at all. And maybe those assumptions are blocking you from taking the initiative. Volunteering for more ownership when ownership on the table was never spoken or declared yet. You had that golden opportunity that was equal field for everybody. But maybe it's your assumption that has held you back, right? So that's the thought, is mentally think about, understand yourself. When are some of the moments where you have a tendency to make certain assumption, and are those true or not, helpful or not? That's your choice, but you should be aware of those. And then let's move on to the next piece. How many of us in any situation, whether it's a team meeting or we're exchanging ideas, we're designing a new program, or we're designing a piece of component that we wanted to enhance in the existing product there. How many of you feel like you have to seek permission before you contribute? I see hands in the middle, hands down there, eyes rolling. There's conscious permission seeking, but there's also unconscious permission seeking, such as, let me give you a few examples. I have this idea, but it may be totally lousy. Let me just try it with you guys anyway. Or say, I heard whatever, that was just said, but maybe we could also try this. It's this maybe. And try to think about some of our other colleagues, male or female, in the same room. Not everybody always do that. Sometimes we unintentionally felt we had to seek permission, or we had to come in with the lower grade of ideas, waiting for others to promote that to be the upper grade. That's, again, both a permission and an assumption thing. What I want to share here is just some of the observations and some of the exchange I've had with fellow women. But the thought here is, guys, there's no right or wrong. We are who we are. However, I have practiced this just purposefully. If you become aware and more conscious of your choice of words, about the unspoken assumption in the back of your mind that's driving your behavior, you are a lot more in control of who you are. And that's totally fine. You just need to understand who you are. Now, with that mindfulness, let's move on about my second thing, where I feel strongly about we have to take initiative, own up to it. What I mean by that, okay, great. I will enlist, the guys in my team to help me out. Let's say I'm currently stuck. I'm working on a particular technical problem. The performance sucks. I don't know where to go from here, right? What do? What would you do? Can I have you chime out some ideas?
Oh, me?
Yes.
If the performance was not good, I would come up with potentially all the reasons why it would not be good and potentially how we could fix them.
And assuming in this case you've tried what you know and it's not working to the level, it improved, but it's still way below where you like it to be. And your next option is to practice enlisting help and support from men in your network. What do?
I would probably go to my boss and be like, okay, these are the ideas that I came up with. This is what I tried. These are the results that I got. Do you have any cool ideas? Any very cool ideas?
I love that. Matter of fact, right? Lay out the facts, lay out the thought process, be very clear with an objective. What is it that you need help? It's as simple as that. Just go straight shoot. That's exactly the way it should be. But notice how she took initiative, right? She was not there waiting in her office to be questioned and then to be challenged. She go approach and go look for help. Why do I want to bring this up? I don't know much about Atlassian culture, and you guys may say, Jin, that never happens in our office. If that's the case, I'm very happy for you. But I will tell you, this is happening in many, many other places as we speak, right? A lot of times I will have a mentee come to me or go to some of the other folks in my network to say, we are so frustrated. I am exhausted. Why? Oh, I'm stuck on something. I do not know how to go ask for help. Why? Take a guess why they felt it's so difficult and therefore so reluctant about reaching out for help. Yes. They try to tie that to say, oh, by seeking help, it's a sign of weakness, or maybe it shows, a judgment of my intelligence level. What may be other reasons? Yeah, exactly. Very similar. Wow, this may be treated as a silly question, right? How could you not know it and still be doing this job? Are you qualified for this job? There's another possibility, which I have observed as well. Sometimes when you go to a colleague, we're all busy, we're all swamped, right? Some of them may have a style that's very much putting you off. I've seen this happen too, right? This is so easy. I can't imagine you're stuck here. You just need to go check library A, B, and C, and good luck digging through those 10,000 lines of code. I don't have time to comb through those with you. Had that happened to you before? I have seen those happen, right? Again, it's not specifically about a gender thing, but it was about the fear of getting rejected, not getting the help needed, and for that reason, it's safer not to go. But here's a story I wanted to share with you. I once had this friend of mine who said, you know what, I really have a hard time getting along with who, and that happened to be a guy, an architect on this project team, right? And that has always been her problem. Project after project, they're always stuck in the same team together, and that was her most frustrating point, is she does not feel like she get along with this architect, and therefore she would never go ask any questions. Out of not knowing much of that, though, at the time, I said for a particular, I think at the time we were working on database security, and there was a particular piece that I know this architect was an expert, because he and I have had that conversation in his previous life. He's really good at it. So I suggested this team member to go talk to our architect. Out of no choice, she did. Later on, she told me she did not like it at all that I asked her to go do this. Because, she's in charge of this write-up, this finding, and she needs that piece of knowledge that he has. So I was connecting the dots as their manager. Interestingly, in that conversation, she not only received the help she was looking for, but they felt more comfortable talking to each other more with technical collaborations. So she's been now a lot more comfortable going back to this team member, and they were able to collaborate in multiple topics together more and more. Why? Because initially she had that assumption that, based on that team member's character, I will be judged as, not as capable. I'm going to be so embarrassed, therefore I don't want to try. And for whatever reason, as she validated, it was not too much of an issue. Right, so it was really a good turning point, but all the trick there is really not to back it off, but own up to that conversation. Just very matter-of-factly present the issue, get the help, and move on. And hopefully we would all enjoy this. Now, this is a scenario of seeking help. In other cases, though, if we reverse, let's say you have an idea to contribute, it's just the same. It's just the same. I'll share an example, right? I had this colleague here who is fresh college grad. She has a lot of good ideas, but she doesn't have necessarily the experience to really know how to make those ideas happen. And for that reason, she's very reluctant about bringing that up. Because, if people ask, then how? She felt like she wouldn't be able to give the full picture. So she came to me. She said, Jin, I wanted to contribute, but I felt like I've been too quiet in the team meetings. I have things, but I'm trying to urge not to say. I don't know what to do. So I said, in that case, speak the truth. Qualify yourself. You have an idea. You don't know how to get it implemented, but you figure it's valuable enough to bring out for the team to think. So she said exactly that. And what was interesting there is team members started to help her to formulate the idea, develop more. They started to say, what if? And then they were providing answers right there too, right? And they were able to table out follow-up items. So pretty quickly, you'll see this team started to norm. That they're now into this mode where they recognize and will be able to lean on each other's strengths to say, some of them are really good about out-of-box thinking, some of them is really good in knocking out that technical details, and some of others are so good about coming back and tie all these loose dots together. So that has become a very high-performing team as they reached out this idea and realized, sometimes even if just have the idea, not have the full picture, not to be the full, expert of this entire field, is actually okay. That's still very valuable for the team. Let's think about what else. As we talked about earlier on here, right? It's owning up to the conversation means you need to initiate. You need to put your ideas out there and take some risk and be willing to say, it may not be the best, but I'm going to bring it out with matter-of-factly without de-emphasizing the value of my idea up front, because we don't know about that, right? Sometimes, though, it's also very helpful when you have something that you're not quite comfortable to bring out in a bigger group, invite a partner, validate in a setting where you're a lot more comfortable, right? So for example, if let's say you have team members you hang around here, it's maybe easier just to chat about this over lunch and see if you're getting any good vibes, right? Is it feasible? Is it interesting? Does it seem to help with the core issue? And maybe people will bring up points to help you fully to develop the idea in a more comprehensive way. That's all possible. But like I said, the key here is you really need to own up to the conversation and not to back away with, again, all those assumptions made, permission seeking, and never getting responded or granted, and therefore you're stuck. So with that, let's move on to the third part, right? We talked about how to do that in 3 steps. 1, understand ourselves. 2, own up to the conversation and take initiative. 3 is what I want to share, small things matter. And this is a collection of a bunch of small things, just again, no right or wrong, but just for us to observe who we are, why we do certain things, and do we want to continue to do it the same way? The answer could be fine either way. So for example, when you come to a team meeting, where do you usually sit? What about you? Yeah, you pick what's convenient, and of course you have your own definition of convenient there, right? Can I hear what would you do for picking your seat?
I like to get away from the VC monitors, so I don't know how to work that.
You don't want to be the one messing with wires. I fully get it. I fully get it. Yeah. How about you?
Whatever has the best view.
Best view meaning
A lot of our
view of the team.
meeting rooms have windows, glass walls.
Uh-huh.
So I like it.
Yeah. Yeah. What are some of the other thoughts?
I usually pick the closest to the door.
Closest to the door. I was waiting to hear that one because I always hear that one. Yeah. So think about it. What does that mean, right? How much you felt yourself is accountable for the topic of this meeting? How would you like to contribute? How would you like to be perceived by your team members? And how ready you think your gesture is telling your colleagues, including your male colleagues, as far as, are you ready to enlist help? Are you ready to receive some ideas? Because that's all sort of an unspoken way of saying. Again, I'm not judging or saying there's a right versus wrong answer, but just be aware, because we are all human beings and we go through all sorts of thoughts in our minds. Now, let's continue to move on with the next test. Now that we found our perfect seat with the best view possible, far away from the VC, no potential risk of getting stranded by any source of wire, now how do we sit? Freeze for a moment to see how each of you sit. And I'm sure you guys have heard about, Amy Cuddy, who I really admire her ability, not only as a sociology expert, being in Harvard, but also her own personal story of trying to recover from the injury and train herself so hard and get back on track with, the risks of potentially lose all of her intelligence level. I mean, that's indeed an intelligence threat there, right? So Amy had this very interesting theory. She, of course, has been studying our physical presence all the time. And she's known famously for this power gesture, right? She is saying when you're like this, When you crouch your shoulder, when you close your arms, you're defensive, you're worried, you don't feel as good. Versus if you open it up and embrace everything, you're ready to take it on, but you're also very kind and gentle to whatever that's outside of you. It's like, so look her up. She has a lot of wonderful, she has a TED Talk too. She's quite amazing. But what I want to talk about is also how you sit, right? I think we will all know at any setting, right? Whether it's a small group discussion for a design meeting or a large team meeting around round tables, the way you sit actually sends a message too. Are you welcoming my suggestion? Are you ready to be helped here? Does she look like bored, or would she be delighted if I give her a suggestion or offer to give her a hand, right? Does she seem to be completely isolated, really focusing on her phone right now, so that, I don't think she's ready to be held accountable for this piece and therefore won't be interested. Why? Because I'm looking to see who I want to team up with in working on that design document. So if she's not very interested, then why do I take the risk to reach out to her? Right? I think these are all important things to think about. And again, I don't believe these rules apply only to men versus women, but because we're talking from the angle of the 17% or the shyer part, I'd like to make us, or at least encourage us to be more aware and try even harder, just because that gives us, and all of, the future girls following us a better chance. So let's go through a couple more examples. We talked about where to sit and how to sit. What about eye contact? Right? I think that's pretty obvious. What shows you're interested, you're involved, you're really comfortable, you're sincere about the thoughts and advice you received, you're sincere in seeking help, versus sometimes it was like, let's just be polite for you to be done. Right? Let's be fair with our own observation. Let me do another test. Let's say we're in a team meeting, and let's say you had a great idea, I added some comment, and now you is ready to insert your own comment. Start.
If it's an alternate opinion, I might say, allow me to share my thoughts with you and see what you think.
What do you guys think? Let's critique her right now by putting her on the spot. Notice she said, allow me to share. Why do you need permission? Again, don't get me wrong. I am not here preaching one right way versus one wrong way. You will catch myself do that all the time. I am who I am. I have to be in peace with my upbringing, my culture, my value system, everything. But just be aware, because as I practice that myself, I actually notice not only a level of difference, but also how I felt about myself, right? That's very important, because when you repeat 10,000 times, allow me, allow me, allow me, you start to think, oh, maybe I do need somebody to allow me for this, when you don't, right? Let's try this again, and let's say we're in a team of, this entire room is in a team meeting, and there's a few of us very vocal. That was a passionate, an item that we're so passionate about. I guarantee you, taking this path is the best way for the product. Users will love it, and this is going to get us to this beautiful conference with the least glitches possible. The others will jump in. No, I don't like this idea at all. Mine is better. How could you ignore the user feedback of A and B and C? We definitely have to go the other way. And you, by the way, know about a particular data point that neither of them paid any attention, but that was very important in making that decision. And you've been trying to look left, look right, look left, look right, trying to say this one thing. What would you do? If I may try with you.
I missed that part, sorry.
Okay, do you have a thought? Do you want to try to play that role? What would you do? You're trying to say, to remind the team a data point that it's really critical in moving this debate forward.
I think when I had a moment without interrupting, I would probably start by speaking like, I wonder if we should. So I would probably be very, not too assertive about it. Like, I know my tendencies, I wouldn't be too assertive. I would try to say it, but I would probably try to say, well, what if we have considered this? That we should consider this.
I love how you bring out both perspective, right? So as Grace knows, I volunteer for the Palo Alto Lean-In Circle. And on leanin.org, there's quite a bit of videos, learning materials, talk about assertive style, how to negotiate, all those things. And by the way, those things are wonderful for men or women, right? We all benefit from those. I often felt my children need to benefit from those as well, because they just need to know, how to observe themselves and be very aware of others. That's the mindfulness is about. So you brought up a great point, right? There is sort of a lack of confidence way, and there's sort of a very matter-of-fact way. Let me show you a data point, or a data point that's important, that may be beneficial for both of you. You're going straight in, versus it may be beneficial for me to remind you something. And keep in mind, debating like this, you don't have a way to insert yourself, right? So obviously, in that case, possibly go straight is your best chance to be heard. But think about that, and think about how the way you try to engage would significantly contribute to the total outcome of this team discussion, right? Because you may bring us a third piece that is so clear, right, that will get everybody to say, yes, that is the path we wanted to go. Now, with that, let's talk about meeting interruptions. Who is frustrated about the amount of interruptions at meeting time? Raise your hand. Okay. All right. I see more and more. I have a big one there, right? I have observed this when I was in Apigee, by the way. Why? We had more guys than girls there. And it was like, boom, 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 boom. And then people would get very red-faced and say, allow me, you just interrupted me. Let me finish. Go back. I'm going to finish. And back and forth, right? Sometimes, in fact, we had to remind the team to say, oh, you know what, who and who has a comment, and who has been patiently waiting, let that person have a chance. So for that reason, I've been working on a draft. So I try to write on Medium, besides being a fan and reader there. And one thing I wanted to recommend was, you know what, women sometimes feel so hard to brag about themselves and promote themselves, but we're in perfect condition helping each other, especially during these meeting interruptions. If I see you have an idea and you've been trying to say things and you got interrupted or never got your turn, I can say, wait, who and who had something? Let her say it. Right? And by the way, the same applies for the guys too. When you do that to the guys, hopefully the guys will come back and do that for you, because we're all in this together. So that's a very practical observation that really helps you guys to buddy up and be able to say, hey, we're all in this for the common goal, and let's work on, help me. Enlist the help there. Help me. Let's work on this project together. So we've talked about why I feel strongly about we really should not ignore the bigger mass outside of our 17%. And hope I've also given you enough example to say, you know what, guys out there are both out there and right here, are more than willing to help us and be part of our fans and champions and networks. And thirdly, we also talked about how, right? Some of the practical, ideas, some of the thoughts, and more importantly about the self-awareness and how that impacts our behavior. I do want to end with one thing, and this would be sort of the parting thoughts here. That is, try not to seek a set of silver bullet and say, I am going to be exactly 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, and I'm done. We have to be ourselves. We have to be comfortable in our own skins. I am who I am, and I should be very proud of what I felt was very valuable to the community. I should be aware of the things I'm not so good at, and be very open and willing to admit those and seek help. But I am who I am, and we all should be very comfortable with that. But by the way, when you're true to yourself, I actually think it's easier for you to get help from anybody, men or women, because that's how we all are. So with that, I'm going to wrap up. I think we're almost at the end of the hour. If I can entertain any questions or thoughts or comments, things you want to share with your fellow workers here, that would be awesome. I think we'd like to have folks on the phone hear you too, so.
I was just going to add a bit of advice that my mom gave me. So my mom is a senior engineer at Google, and kind of the problem that you were mentioning earlier, where there was kind of an interpersonal problem with a senior guy on the team, and she managed to kind of break through it by building a non-work relationship with him. Like she ended up becoming Facebook friends with him and saw like the posts about his kids and started talking to him about his kids on a regular basis. And like that created the interpersonal bond between the two. And this was a guy that was like regularly blocking her ability to do her job. And by creating this bond, he is actually now one of her main supporters. So I just kind of wanted to throw that out there.
Thank you for sharing that. That's great.
Any other comments, feedback? All right, well, with that, thank you so much, Jin. That was awesome.
Thank you, guys. I enjoyed it.